computer.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Thank you to our guest speaker, Kyle Zhang from Tapestry Community Capital. This is the July 2nd meeting of the Forest of the Northeast Bioregional Funding Group. I'm Mike Kroick. My co-coordinator, Roberta Hill, is on the call. Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to hear from Kyle about an innovative bond program that Tapestry has put together and practiced for a few years, which I believe is a really interesting, novel, and forward-thinking way to approach place-based finance, which slots right into bioregionalism very well. So, with that said, I want to turn things over to Kyle, and thank you, and a warm welcome for him.
Thanks for having me, Mike. So yeah, a little bit more about Tapestry as an organization. We were founded as a nonprofit cooperative in 2018 by our parent company, the Toronto Renewable Energy Cooperative. So it all started with a wind turbine project in downtown Toronto. And ever since then, in the early 2000s, we got a lot of other nonprofits, charities, and co-ops who reached out to us hoping to replicate that model of finance. And so that's how Tapestry was born, to be that North Star and guide to support these organizations every step of the way. And so to date, we've successfully advised our issuers to raise a little over 129 million from 4,300 investors to finance over 70 meaningful community projects with high social and environmental impact in sectors like affordable housing, renewable energy, arts and culture, among others. And so the challenge that we're trying to solve is twofold. The first recognizing that there are a lot of nonprofits, charities, and co-ops out there who want to acquire assets and scale their impact, but they don't typically have the same access to capital as their private enterprise counterparts. And then the second is recognizing that there are a lot of institutions and individuals who want to invest in their money in positive ways, but they need an investment vehicle to be able to do this. And so our solution is the community bond. If you're hearing the term for the first time, it's essentially a loan that organizations borrow from individual community members, local businesses, foundations. Anyone across the country can invest in your community bond. And this is a tool used exclusively by nonprofits, charities, and cooperatives. The graphic on the right shows the circular nature of the community bond, where an organization will issue a bond, and then a community member will purchase a bond. When enough community members have purchased a bond, they can finance the capital project. And then it's through that capital project that will be used to repay those bondholders over time. And then at the end of the bond term, the bond issuer, so the nonprofit, can choose to give investors a reinvestment option as well. Especially in the sectors we worked with, like affordable housing, where there's always new developments and new projects. This is a really great way to scale operations and expand impact. And so the key benefits that we see from this model is that community investors are able to make a fair return by investing in projects that they believe in. Nonprofits and charities are able to own their assets and scale their impact while ensuring their own financial sustainability. And then also communities are better served with the access to the services and spaces that they need. And so why consider issuing a community bond? Well, first, they're really flexible. The reason why we've seen so much traction and why it's an effective tool is because nonprofits are able to set their own terms. They get to set their own interest rate, they get to set their own term length, they get to set their own investment minimum. So it's really bespoke financing for exactly what they need. They're also really inclusive. The lowest community bond denomination typically starts at $500. So it really ensures maximum participation from the community. We are trying to drive that minimum even lower to potentially $20 or $50, recognizing that for some individuals and families, 500 or $1,000 minimum might still create some barriers. But then we've also seen pension funds and other larger institutions invest at several million dollars, which I'll go into a little bit later in the presentation. So it really casts a wide net in terms of the type of investors that community bonds attract. They're also really engaging in that it typically creates a powerful sense of ownership because a lot of people are looking to go beyond just like ESG, where you don't really know what your money is actually going towards. Whereas when you're investing in kind of a place-based opportunity, you can see and visualize the impact that you have on the community, and that's really powerful. They're also typically more efficient than donation campaigns in term from a fundraising perspective. So especially for larger capital projects, a lot of our issuers have been able to raise several million dollars in a few short months, whereas if they try to do that with just a traditional donation campaign, it could take significantly longer. Um, and again, that's partly due to the fact that this is an investment and not a donation. So there is a return attached to it, and it's easier for people to part with their money if it's an investment. And then in terms of, I guess, the demand that we're seeing, like I mentioned in the beginning, there's a lot of Canadians out there who want to shift their capital just from the bank into more genuine impact opportunities. And there's a lack of supply in this, I guess, impact investment segment or these place-based investment opportunities. And so every single campaign we've ever devised has always consistently sold out. And again, that's simply due to the fact that a lot of people want to put their money in positive initiatives and create social impact. And then finally, this model is really scalable in that um, it's really easily replicable. And once you've built up the invest pool of investors, you can always go back to them for refinancing. And a small case study that I'll share is of an organization called SolarShare. They're Canada's largest renewable energy cooperative and one of our oldest and largest clients. Their first raise was, I believe, for $200,000. And to date, they've raised over $85 million dollars in community bonds to scale up their renewable energy projects across Ontario. So that's just one example of how an organization was able to scale up their operations significantly without the use of traditional financing. So how Tapestry helps is that we have an expert team that guides organizations through a dedicated process, which I'll get into. But we also have a secure and scalable digital platform that takes care of the bond management. So we kind of cover both the front end and the back end aspects of a community bond issuance. And this is very briefly, this is what our process typically looks like. The first stage of our process is a planning feasibility study. What we're really trying to assess is, I guess, two key components. One is the project, more so the financial viability of the project. So ensuring that it has the revenue drivers to be able to service the debt over time. And then the second aspect, um, sorry, is the community of support. So even if a project is financially sound and has great returns, if there's no community of support, it can be really challenging to raise money through this method. So by going through a series of exercises, we'll have a pretty good pulse on the potential success of a community bond. And then once we've been able to move past the feasibility stage, we can move into setting up the community bond, which is the structuring phase. And this is where we'll help organizations develop an investor package. Within that investor package includes an offering statement. So very similar to a prospectus that highlights all of the community bond terms available, potential risks, risk mitigation strategies. We also help organizations set up a dedicated sales and marketing strategy on how to best convert that social capital that they've built into financial capital for the organization. And then we also have our own proprietary investment management platform as well to process all of the investments as they come in. And so that's typically what's involved in the structuring phase. And once we've done the setup, we can move to, I guess, the most fun phase of our process, which is actually raising the capital. And so I want to note that Tapestry does not, we don't sell these bonds on our client's behalf. We're simply here to provide the systems and the guidance that they need to be successful in a bond raise. So we'll be processing the investments on the back end. We'll be fielding any PR opportunities, event sponsorships, doing everything we can to get the word out. But we also but it's really critical that issuers have the capacity and resources on the ground to be soliciting investors. And then once an organization has reached their raise goal, Tapestry will also take care of the ongoing management of the bonds. So the investment tax slips, the interest disbursements, the new investment campaigns, reinvestment campaigns, that all kind of falls under our purview. So to highlight a few case study examples, one of them is a current active campaign that we have in Barrie, Ontario, and it's by a group called Redwood Park Communities. They're raising $10 million to finance affordable housing projects, and it's a portfolio of different projects. I would say one misconception of the community bond is that it can only be used for one property, but that's simply not true. I think we're seeing more and more nonprofit organizations considering more of a portfolio approach where you kind of raise one large lump sum and kind of inject that capital into a few different key projects. Another project we supported with was the Kensington Market Community Land Trust. And so they were hoping to raise $1 million, or I mean, they did raise $1 million to preserve affordable housing in Toronto's Kensington Market. And how they did this was by preemptively raising that $1 million acquisition fund. Because the situation is that when properties come up in Kensington Market, private developers are very quick to kind of take it off and purchase. And so Kensington Market Community Land Trust really wanted to be in a strong position and compete with that private market to be able to take it off the speculative market. And so that's what we helped them do was set up that community bond. And for them, they didn't have a specific property identified, but they had a pretty good idea of the number of units that they wanted to acquire and the impact that it would have. And so that's kind of what we modeled their campaign around. Sorry. The another example I wanted to highlight is and Well Community Homes, who has raised $6 million from 100 investors for pre-development on four new affordable housing sites in Hamilton, Ontario. And for them, even before Tapestry came on board, they had their own independent like impact loan program where they would typically borrow from high net worth individuals in their community. And I think even beyond Indwell, I think we're seeing a lot of other organizations, especially typically in rural communities, um, who are seeking kind of that impact investment or small loan from certain highly committed community members. And again, I think that just reminds us that, this type of financing is not new. Maybe the community bond term is new, but in principle, borrowing from family, community to build valuable assets is one of the oldest, forms of financing. So yeah, just thought I'd highlight that. And for them, they actually went out with a $5 million goal to begin with, but because of the additional demand that they saw, they increased their goal to $6 million. Um, and then the last example I want to highlight is with the Ottawa Community Land Trust, who raised $3 million from about 132 investors to purchase two properties to preserve affordable housing in Ottawa. And again, this was another scenario where they went out with a $1.6 million campaign. And because of the additional demand that they saw from foundations and individuals, they bumped it up to $3 million and were able to acquire two properties instead of just one. Um, I think we can skip this slide, just recognizing that so Tapestry currently we only work in Canada. And we have kind of this quarterly intake program, but only organizations who are incorporated in Canada are eligible. This is kind of a summary of our current clients that we support. So I know I mentioned a lot of or only affordable housing examples in my case study, but that's because for the past 2 years, we've had a really strong relationship with the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and that has been the biggest funder for us. And so we've done a lot of work in affordable housing, but we're also doing work in sectors like food security with a food bank, other sectors like arts and culture, as well as healthcare. And we're really excited about expanding into new sectors like long-term care, youth and child spaces, among others. And I think what's also important to highlight is that we don't just work with large organizations in large urban centers. We also support a lot of grassroots organizations and rural communities as well. So we're really inclusive on that front. In terms of some additional campaign statistics, typically the average individual investment size is roughly $13,600, and the average institutional investment size is a little over 115,000. The largest investment size to date was in the Indwell Community Bond campaign at 2.5 million by a local pension fund. And then the smallest investment size, as I mentioned, is $500. In terms of the breakdown of individuals to institutions, we're looking at about 86% individuals to 14% institutions. And again, recognizing that these are place-based investment opportunities, you'll always typically get a lot of individual community members who are really passionate and want to support the project, but you also get some local businesses and foundations who want to support as well. The average rate of return for investors on a community bond in 2024 was about 4%, and this is pretty typical. The average term of community bond right now is about 2.5 to 5%. There's typically at least three different bond series that investors can choose from, depending on their investment horizon and their return expectations. And the average term length is roughly 37 years. So in terms of who will typically invest, we'll have impact seekers who are just typically trying to do the most good with their money. We'll also have local supporters who, know about the work that you're doing because they, reach or geographically live very close to the project or to the organization and want to continue supporting your cause. And then there are also those who are cause connected who might not be in the local geographic region, but really want to support the cause of affordable housing or renewable energy. And a small example of this is in Indwell's campaign. While it was located in Ontario, we also had investment from the territories like the Yukon, as well as Northwest Territories. So it goes to show, even though those investors might not be directly impacted by the work of Indwell, they still wanted to support the cause of affordable housing and do their part. There are also those who are return focused. I would say this is typically less common because if you're purely financially return focused, community bonds aren't the right investment opportunity for you. It's typically a combination of wanting to achieve impact, but also get a fair return as well. And then in terms of the demographics of investors, we have pretty good coverage across all age groups. And then in terms of the reinvestment rate, we also see a pretty good renewal rate of about 70%. So again, it goes to show that when organizations are able to steward these investors, pay interest on time, prove that they're hitting their impact milestones, that these investors really want to stick with them for the long term. Um, and then just wanted to very quickly wrap up with a new initiative that we've launched. So it's called the Weave Community Capital Fund. Which is essentially a fund that covers all community bond projects in Canada. And this has been our response to a lot of institutions and accredited investors who have told us, hey, love the community bond idea and the grassroots nature of it, but the ticket sizes and the raise sizes have been a little bit too small to justify the cost of due diligence. And so we've recently launched this $30 million fund to really give those institutional and accredited investors something big enough to get behind. And so the idea is that that $30 million fund will loan alongside the community bonds that these issuers are raising. And we're really intentional about setting those loan terms at identical rates at as those community bond terms, because there's a lot of kind of impact investment funds who say they're impact first, but when you look at some of the rates that they're lending at, it just becomes it's just not productive in terms of building more affordable housing or achieving other outcomes. And so we're really intentional about setting up this fund to be able to loan out at low rates, because I think patient capital is what these social purpose organizations need to thrive and expand their impact. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. I'll pause there.
Cool. Thank you so much, Kyle. Fascinating program, I think. I could fill the entire rest of the hour with questions for you, but let me open things up to the group, make sure everybody has a chance to be heard. Um, so go ahead, everybody. Welcome to those who joined during the call.
Well, I can
Go
start
go
with,
ahead. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
can start. Well, thank you again, Kyle. That was a really great presentation, very clear. And and actually I started thinking about all the ways that we might be able to apply such a program at the organization that I work for, which is the Center for an Ecology-Based Economy, where we have a lot of those kinds of projects that you were talking about, that we have been helping to bring together and that we're planning on. So it made me wonder, do you have a counterpart in the US at this point? Do you know others that are doing the kind? I love the fact that you ha actually have a smartphone application that helps kind of manage some of this, the technical aspects of issuing these bonds. Do you know of anybody else in the US that's doing this work?
Yeah, it's a great question. We don't have any, like even in Canada, there's no really comparables that do everything that we provide in terms of like both the back end systems, but also that front end like expertise and guidance. Um, in the US, I guess there are some groups like crowd lending might be the closest one to what we do.
Crowd lending or crowd lending
Crowd lending.
with a
Yeah,
P?
I was like crowd,
With a C.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
crowd. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so yeah, like crowdfunding has always kind of been around. Crowd lending is I guess would more fall in line with the community bond because it would be a debt vehicle. So I know there's a couple platforms. Forgetting the names of them, but I did look into a few. I will say if you wanted to learn more about how you could do like a similar model, because community bonds do exist in the US, like as an instrument, but you have to be, I guess, wary about what the securities laws are in your state, and what those implications are if you do choose to move forward with a community bond. A helpful resource that I've typically directed US-based initiatives to is the National Coalition for Community Capital. So it's called NC3, and you can go to their website, and yeah, contact them. They would probably be the best resource. We've done a few um, panel sessions and webinars with them in the past. So while they might not be able to support you in setting up a community bond, they might have the right people in their network who could potentially guide you further.
Thank you. That's a good
And
question. I just
And
want
I
to have a
have,
quick follow, if I may, just a quick follow
yeah,
on to that because you kind of you're doing this even in Canada. You're kind of unique, you've said. And um so I just it just kind of begs the question, what was the impetus behind your group coming together? Like what did you have that you saw like yeah, what was the genesis of your work?
Yeah, I mean, again, I guess it stems from our parent company that has been around since the early 2000s, and the community ownership aspect always interested in us in terms of recognizing that, especially in the nonprofit and social purpose sector, not all these organizations are going to be quote unquote bankable. And so recognizing that they need alternative financing solutions, and also recognizing that, there are a lot of Canadians who would like to support those type of projects, but just don't know how. And so I guess that really motivated us to create this entity, um, that is Tapestry, to support those organizations in um, finding, I guess, creative solutions to financing their highly impact driven projects.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
go ahead, Nate.
yeah. Actually, some more responses to you, Roberta. The things I'm aware of, there's a lawyer named Michael Schuman who wrote a book called the Small Mart Revolution and a number of other things, and has a local investment. He's got a lot of knowledge about this kind of space, so I think he'd be a great person to go to with this presentation, or meet with Kyle and see what he knows about the emerging space here. And I'm wondering if anyone on the call knows about Walden Bank, and if there's
Walden?
Walden, yeah.
Walden?
They're in northern, Bill, you know?
I know of them, and possibly even because you've mentioned them in the past, but I
Okay.
heard of them.
They seem like people we could talk to right away. I mean, they're fairly young. They're online banking, and they have a very similar philosophy. They're kind of food and farm oriented in northern New England primarily, maybe Massachusetts as well. Um, so they're bioregional for sure, and I think they'd be very interested in this instrument and being able to talk with your folks, Kyle, about how they might model something here. And then with Michael's expertise, we might have some of the Michael and well, both Mikes. We have some lawyers in this who could look at the state by state concerns. So
Welden. W-E-L.
Walden,
Or,
as
like
in
like
borough,
Walden Pond.
like Walden
Walden
Pond,
Pond.
Yeah.
like
A
borough, yeah.
Walden.
gotcha.
And when I looked it up, there's a number of things that come up. So you've got to navigate to the specific one. You know it when you see it.
Yeah, definitely. And they're
So
very personal in terms of their, you can email them and you'll hear back from them, and they're very interested in talking with any real human being in a real
so
human way. Um, so just I want to throw my 2 cents in terms of where I'm coming from with this. It's the bioregional regeneration, as well as being involved in a number of nonprofits in Connecticut, in the New Haven area, where the current I mean, we're looking at the complete collapse of the nonprofit structure that's underpinned a huge portion of how we do things. And I'm talking with people at the Community Foundation of Greater New Haven, and organizations like Save the Sound, uh, and others who are Clifford Beers Clinic, which is primarily mental health for youth. And then I'm working with a seniors oriented group that has multiple programs. Um, and we really need something. We need a different mechanism. We need a finance system that works more like water. And this looks like a great potential piece of that.
yeah, I'll jump in quickly, responsive to a few other things. So one, Kyle, there's as you may be gathering, there are a few of us on the call attempting to establish some capital stacks, and I think this is a good solution for a lot of people. Most of them are in all of them that I'm aware of, factually, are in the United States, and so. Like Nate said, he outed me. I'm a lawyer. I've been looking at a lot of the terms in a few of the states where things are where things are happening, and it seems like there aren't any barriers, and to be very honest, I don't think this government is interested in erecting or enforcing any financial barrier of any kind whatsoever, right? So it feels like a time that things could move. It's just a matter of essentially, like you said, I'm aware of only a few. You just named them all pretty much. I'm only aware of a few people in the or groups in the English speaking world doing anything like the community bonds that Tapestry does. And you folks are definitely ahead of the curve in terms of everybody doing anything like it. So if it's possible to consult with you folks, I've identified some bond issuers in the region. It still would take some doing, but probably by the end of the year we could rope some talks in if things go well. And so if you've got people at Tapestry who are interested in that kind of work without having to, really gain any liability other than just the bond program itself and communicating that with the team on our end, we've got some opportunities that could arise in that vein. It seems like you're mostly receptive, so I'll keep you in the Rolodex and keep you. Well, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good. And I also just being that first point of contact for a lot of potential clients, I do see that interest coming from um, the US, and we did have that conversation of when we might want to expand our services beyond just Canada. I know with Canada it's very easy because there's a national prospectus exemption that enables community bonds to exist, whereas again within the US it's state by state. And so I think we want to really sorry, perfect and make our processes as efficient as possible, and really hit all the impact milestones or impact objectives that we're hoping to achieve here, and then we can start considering, how else do we want to replicate this as well in other countries and new geographies.
Cool. If you ever do get aggressive about expanding south of the border, please keep me in mind. I could do a lot on the other end.
Will do.
Go ahead, Marianne.
Yeah, thank you for your work, Kyle. It's very exciting. I guess when you say in the region, Mike, do you mean Colorado or do you mean in the Northeast region? Because it does seem like some of the barriers might be at the state level from what has been said.
Yeah. So it's actually tougher to implement in Colorado because the only people issuing private bonds are the government. There aren't any groups like in the Northeast. Raise Green does a lot of the solar bonds that fund like rooftop solar, that kind of thing, and it's almost plug and play with a group like that, except that they haven't seemed to have conceived of the community bond as a way to like raise low dollar amounts from a lot of people. So there, and then Walden Bank, like Nate said, there's a lot of people or a lot of groups that seem very close and very amenable to the idea, and it's really just a matter of expanding it, because I think when you've got a local investment base that can see tangible results in their life outside of just the return that they get from the bond, when eventually it matures, if you can do that, you can really generate, I believe you can really generate some enthusiasm among people, and that can start to eke out a little, we're under the financial domination of Wall Street, et cetera. But if we can build a kernel of something real in a few places, it could grow and do something that's actually good. Go ahead, Bill.
Great, thanks. And sorry, everyone, for coming on late and missing the initial presentation. I had this in my mind as 2:00, not 1:30, so apologies. So I'll catch up on the recording of the presentation, but I did just want to mention part of why I'm on this call, in addition to my own personal education, is because I am in conversation with a bioregional group in your neck of the woods, Kyle. So there's the greater Takaranto bioregion is very well established. And Brian Pupa and Susan Bosak are doing great work there. And I don't know if you've crossed paths with them, but the people who are of more direct interest is a watershed initiative there. I think it's the Grand River watershed is just starting up in the kind of Waterloo, Cambridge area. And I have a close colleague, Randy Saad, with the Flourishing Enterprise Institute, and he's working with the community foundation. There's a series of 8, I believe, community foundations up there working on that. So I let him know about this presentation. He also is a member of the design school that this group that you're meeting with now, we operate under the umbrella of the Design School for Regenerating Earth. And he's also a member of that. So he could sit in, but he just wasn't able to. So this is just by way of saying, there may be folks above the border that you might be able to engage with. And I think establishing a practice that in a bioregional context could then help it spread in the bioregional world. So, and again, sorry if that you've already sort of discussed this and it doesn't work somehow or something like that, but I just thought I'd put that on your radar screen.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And if you're okay with sending like an introduction to them. I'm happy to chat with them and see how we might be able to support. And yeah, I think like that could be one of the ways in which you might be able to kind of sit in, like if they do move forward with a community bond, for instance, you might be able to sit in on some of those meetings and just kind of
Yep.
get institutional knowledge for you to kind of yeah take back and see how that might apply south of the border.
That would be great. And what I'll probably do is just wait until we have this recording so that he's educated himself so that
Yep.
he can come into the call, ready to go deeper.
Perfect.
Cool. Thanks.
Cool. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, just one of the phrases that's come up amongst in our waters in our landscape is rage giving. And I think if it could be rage investment, just the frustration with how hard it's been to get stuff done that just is basic common sense and care to get done. And apparently getting much harder. But I think, Mike, you're noticing a possible segue here to something that actually is much easier if we can do this in a timely way that doesn't tweak beaks in the process. But I think there's a lot of motivation and a lot of ways to tap into that motivation that can take it from a cynical or hopeless place and put it in a hopeful place. I think that's really important. And the bioregional regeneration piece, I think, also has. I love that you made that or bring that connection in, Bill, because there's an organicity or there's an organic kind of substructure that the current even the nonprofit world, even in Canada, is still fairly fragmented. And one of the projects I'm looking at here is my organization, Interfaith Volunteer Caregivers. I mean, it has a garden collaborative as part of it, but it's not nominally bioregional or regenerative on the surface of it, but underneath it, it's deeply both. And there's efficiency isn't exactly the right word, but when our financial systems can more closely model on biotic systems, I think we're going to find a lot better growth of the regeneration. It might not increase rates of return in terms of dollars, but the integrity and resilience of the communities that are served will be far greater.
Thank you, Nate. Marianne, I see your hand really quickly. I would like to ask one if that's okay. Kyle, you said that the usual rate of return on the bonds is between, or last year, I guess, was between 2.5% and 5%. You said 4 was pretty typical. What do you notice? Like, what qualities do the projects have that will justify or sustain or allow those lower yield bonds? Or is that strictly like short duration, like a super short duration bond or something like that? How does it break down?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, a lot of like all of the projects that we support have some sort of impact component. And again, that's just a part of our mission. I think, recognizing that, especially in affordable housing, where the margins just simply aren't there, that 2 to 5% is basically all they can afford, right? Like if they could pay more, they would, but that's just the reality of it. So I think for investors who want to get into the space, they need to be willing to take that haircut on the financial return in exchange for that, for the impact that is created from the project. So again, like all of these projects, like affordable housing, were measured by typically number of units created, number of individuals or families housed, or percentage affordability, or renewable energy, number of tons of carbon emissions diverted. There are all these different metrics that we use to typically assess, what that impact is. And our issuers are pretty good about communicating their impact to their investors as well, because again, it's an impact first investment. And when we did survey a good number of those investors who have come in, about 97% said the I guess main reason for them investing was that impact, the return or the social return on impact, social return on investment, rather than the financial return. So again, I think when you're dealing with, compassionate community members, they're not so worried about, um, the financial return that they receive. Some of these individuals are even donating the interest back because they don't want to make a financial return on, like an indigenous housing project, for instance. So, it really does, I guess, vary depending on the community, but that's typically been our experience, of why people choose to forego the financial return in exchange for that impact.
Brief follow-up. So do you notice, have you priced out, you mentioned a bunch of different impacts that, I'm sure you've done some analysis. Have you priced out different impacts, or do you find that that level of detail is necessary?
It's a good question. It's something that we're thinking of because there certainly is a price attached to, like getting someone off the streets or something like that. And translating that impact into a dollar amount can certainly help some investors visualize it. But so far to date, because all of our community bond campaigns have always consistently sold out without the need to kind of price out those individual impacts. We've kind of just gone gone with that and got them on sale as quickly as possible. But I also lead our kind of impact measurement function at Tapestry, and that is certainly something I'm thinking of is how do we assign that dollar value, because then you might be able to involve government bodies and others, to really, if they're not investing in a community bond, they might be able to provide a loan guarantee or backstop the bond, which de-risks the project and could crowd in more investors. So definitely things that we're thinking about on our end, certainly.
Cool. Marianne, just a second. So I'm putting an article together about what I'm calling distributed returns. I've had a lot of similar thoughts to apparently what's going on at Tapestry over the last couple of years. If you're leading that project, can I reach out to you and
Yeah.
yeah, cool, great. All right, Marianne, go ahead.
I think you mentioned one of the areas that you're thinking about moving into or adding involved elder care.
Long-term care.
Yeah, and long-term care, right? And I see a lot of potential in that in the States because with like I don't know, father that we're caring for in the midst of it, there's just such a route to impoverishment no matter what you've done, no matter what long-term care insurance you've bought, no matter if you've paid into Medicare for many years. So I see potentially, many people who might see that as a real investment in their own future to have some different structure than at least we currently have in the States. So yeah, I'm excited to continue to follow on what you're doing with that because that's an area that I'm particularly looking at and interested in, and do think people see the real potential that is like the not financial return, but maybe a negative cost, like like what they're some other solution. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that and how you're thinking about that yet.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't sorry, we haven't officially worked with a long-term care home yet. We were in talks with the previous uh one, but there were some environmental concerns about them like developing on the green belt. Again, this is another example of why we always try to have a pretty wholesome like impact assessment on these clients before we move forward, because we don't want to support a project that is going to damage the environment or harm society. And so, um, but yeah, like you said, I think there is a lot of opportunity in long-term care, typically because uh, the projects are very capital intensive, and also, at least in the Canadian context, the government funding isn't always sufficient for capital redevelopments or capital developments in general. And so this is why there is a need for kind of alternative investment vehicles like the community bond. So yeah, I'm happy to keep you updated, or if you follow our page, you'll know like what type of projects we're supporting. But we've already kind of looked into a few conferences and events that we want to do, and some partnerships we want to establish in that space. Recognizing, I think, especially in certain provinces, about half of the long-term care homes are nonprofit, so we can certainly work with those groups. And even on the for-profit side, we are starting to have conversations of, what does it look like for Tapestry to start working with for-profit initiatives um, as well. And again, we want to be mindful that even if they are for-profit, they could still obviously generate like a social return, like a lot of social enterprises are for-profit. So that's also an area we're looking into as well.
Just a quick follow-up. I guess I'm thinking even more sort of community, I guess what I've heard called elderly communities. So not even so specifically like a long-term care facility that might do long-term care in a different way that feels more humane.
Mm.
So yeah, I will reach
Yeah,
out.
so I can give some examples of that. So in our organization provides medical rides for elders. We provide incontinence products. We have community building experiences like collective community art around gardens, around public gardens. We have a medical equipment loan bank. We've recently lost a lot of what it went through several different funnels to get to us, but we've had more than a 50% drop in our funding for that rides program. So we've gone to a membership model for, 80% of the riders. But, we're still way under in terms of volunteers. Our executive director is working with one assistant and one part-time 5-hour communications person and working 65 hours a week. And, this is nuts, but we're trying to, we're neighbors helping neighbors live lives of connection and care with seniors at the heart. There's also a program called Home Haven, which is an aging at home program. They're kind of a sister organization. And all of these organizations could do a lot more, and cumulatively could create a community where people needed to go into elder care less frequently or later in the process, just by increasing the amount of caring in the community itself, making it easier for family members, for example, to take on a load. If you have a ride organization that can do all the rides, then you're free to still work. And so this kind of funding, I see it as kind of a reservoir for a large number of community projects is what I'm looking for. Not just one project, but a collection of, let's say our community foundation partnered with Weldon Bank or something like that. And rather than having the investment model that people looking towards retirement are looking for, which has a different purpose, that we could build a reservoir. And I think the bonds could work really well for that, which brings up the question I had when I raised my hand, which is just the mechanics of how to actually how there's actually even a 4% return. Oh, where's that coming from? It's certainly not coming from the nonprofit project itself, as far as I understand. And I understand it. It might be a nonprofit. I mean, there might be, let's say a elderly housing, and there's a real estate piece there where there could be some appreciation. But yeah, that's the part I don't get. Where does the return come from?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, like you said, the majority of our community bond projects typically have a real estate component. Like all of it kind of falls under the umbrella of social purpose real estate. And capital projects will work best with community bonds. I mean, a group can certainly raise community bonds for operations and to hire staff and stuff. But typically that repayment is less defined. The pathways to generating that return, I mean, it's a few different ways. Like in affordable housing, typically they might raise the bond to cover like pre-development costs, and then the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation will provide construction financing, which will subsequently take out the bonds and repay all the bondholders. So that's like one of the ways. The other way is to essentially generate like rental income, and you also get like rent subsidies um, uh, that will support with kind of that ongoing cash flow. Another way is to raise like donations, if you, especially if you're a charity, and that's another way you can pay back the bonds over time.
Mhm.
And then another really common one is to use community bonds to refinance. So, you know, let's say you have a 7 year term or 7 year issuance. At the end of the 7 years, maybe you've only paid back 1 million of the $2 million that you borrowed. You can go back to that same pool of supporters and say, hey, would you like to roll your investment over into the next bond series? And they typically give you that kind of extra runway, another 7 years for you to pay back the remaining 1 million. So it's a combination of different ways. Again, we understand that while not all nonprofits have, you know, a dedicated revenue model, sometimes there is a business case. So for instance, if a nonprofit has been operating out of like a leased space and they've been able to, you know, consistently raise enough to pay their rent, then and we worked with an arts group that was in this exact situation when we modeled it. It was actually cheaper to own their space in the long run, just given how expensive their their lease has become. And so sometimes it's not a dedicated revenue model, but there is a business case for, you know,
Mhm.
you've been
Mhm.
able to meet up your monthly lease payments, so you should be able to service a mortgage, or in this case, a bond.
Mhm.
So there's a few different ways of how
Great.
that repayment looks like and how that return is generated.
That's really helpful. A couple follow-up questions. One, I just want to say, Marianne and I have mentioned this, have talked a little bit about the regenerative aging uh, challenge for a few years now, because we've both had parents going through this at different times, and now I have in-laws. And there's a huge revenue piece there, is that it's just the way it's being done right now is so ridiculously expensive that if you had a non-extractive, community-based uh, project that was actually based on what people need to prevent the kinds of things that are going on now, um, and where care comes when it's needed, not when it's too late. There's an enormous amount of capital that's just being, it's an incredibly vampiric situation there, and people don't feel like they have any other options. So I see that as a potential. And then the other follow-up is there any kind of commenting in this? So if, or is it all per project? So let's say you get a 15% rate of return on one project. Can that, in terms of the project success, is there any way in which the fund distributes that, or is it just or
Uh,
pigeonholed to is it the field that's being supported, or is it the particular projects?
um, yeah, it's a good question. I would say it's like typically project by project,
Okay.
and that's typically what it determines, you know, what they set the bonds rate at. But typically
That's
across
what I would expect. Yeah.
yeah, typically across all the sectors, it's always been 2.5 to 5%. I do want to mention that I do have another meeting to talk to, and I did tell Roberta and
Okay.
this, but if there are any other questions, feel free, like they have my contact, feel free to shoot me an email or anything, and I'm always happy to chat as well. So yeah, thanks for having me again.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure, Kyle. Very interesting stuff. Thank you so much, and keep us, keep, especially if you're trying to get, there's a lot of possibility for funding like this to replace nonprofit funding in the States right now. There's an opportunity apparently. So,
Great.
excuse me. Keep me in the Rolodex if you guys are trying to push down, and I'll reach out about that article and everybody else. Thanks to Kyle. Send questions if you have them.
Take
Thank
care.
All right.
Thank
you.
you.
Cheers, everybody. Have a great
Thanks,
day.
Kyle. And
Thanks,
yeah,
Mike.
I do
Are
have.
we going to stick around for a little bit and chat, or oh, Mike's already gone. Okay. So I suppose we could.
See ya.
Yeah, I will work on the recording. I'll send it out via email.
Thank you.
And I will also
Yes,
try
thanks.
post. Oops, Mike's back again.
Ah,
Hang on 1 second. He might have jumped off by mistake.
Oh, there is.
hey, Mike.
My
What?
fault. I got hit the button. I do have to leave. My wife got tied up at a doctor's appointment that shouldn't have taken as long as it did. So I'm gonna have to get Molly pretty soon. But yeah, thanks for attending,
Yeah,
everybody.
thank
It's
you, Mike, for lining this up. It was really interesting, and I do think that it has a great deal of potential. And it is surprising that we don't have a real good corollary yet here in the US. So it does seem like it's an opportunity if we can help make some connections to help spur interest in this model.
Yeah, and not to kick the conversation off too much, but we left, our group left off with the sort of question hanging, like what sort of group do we want to be going forward? And meetings like today can't be the entire thing, but I do think that if you turn me loose and I keep finding interesting people doing finance stuff that is relevant bioregionally, people who are, who have successfully financed projects who can come and talk about how, that kind of thing. I think we could be a good forum and generate some interest that way. I don't think anybody else in the design school is really tackling those questions. So go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, just a quick two things on my radar screen. One is that Holly McCann from the Blue Ridge Food Shed Trust, who's active in North Carolina, she just presented in the BioFi Cultivator program. And she's been posting on Hilo about perpetual purpose trusts. And so that's something, and in fact, I was going to do this during the call, but I didn't know if it was going to be too peripheral. So there's a link. This isn't something she provided. And actually, I should throw it in there as well. There's a North Carolina resource, the Croatan Institute, who I recently reconnected with, and they just did a webinar or some such on that. So I'll try to find that link and get it out as well. So that's one angle. I haven't looked deeply into it myself. I'm just sort of passing that along. The other thing that I'm in conversation about, so I mentioned this in my comment to Kyle, the I think it's Grand River Watershed. Randy Saad is doing up as a subset of the Greater Takaranto bioregion. So he's the community foundation executive director up there, I think, for the city of Waterloo. Is kind of this rock star from Cleveland, had done really great work at the Cleveland Community Foundation, and came up there and is essentially like he's a philanthropy abolitionist. He's like, yeah, this shouldn't exist. This is a stupid way to move money. And so he's apparently, so they're just launching a bioregional initiative, a watershed level bioregional initiative. And one of the things that they're looking to do is to coordinate amongst 8 community foundations there to, and you could arguably say that a community foundation already is at least, potentially a bioregional financing facility. But what really needs to happen is to aggregate it up to a bioregional level. And so they're starting to explore that. I'm going to be having a conversation with the Community Foundation of Western Massachusetts coming up. This is something that Marianne and I have talked about in the past. Joanna Valentine is a sister-in-law of a mutual friend of ours. And so I'm going to try to get that same conversation rolling here in our neck of the woods, and then I can sort of, share that out.
Well, Bill, if you are going to do that,
yeah,
it'd be really nice if we could invite, like we have a Maine Community Foundation that's very active in our state, and it'd be really nice to get them there to learn what I think your step between a community foundation and a BFF is really, really insightful. And what would it take to kind of shift the orientation when so much of the infrastructure and the goodwill is there.
Right.
So if you do end up doing that, please keep us informed, and then maybe we can also push it out through this group. If you're saying, Mike, to kind of make that one of the specialties of this group is that we're kind of looking at these alternative funding models that we can also somehow participate in that.
And the people I wanted on the call, some of the key people were Community Foundation of Greater New Haven, and we have we have a new director here who came in as the administration was changing, and one of her comments on a call with it was an executive, it was a board president's call I was on, and she was saying that in working for the city of New Haven for 20 years in the Housing and Livable Cities Initiative, it was just incredibly frustrating because you couldn't do anything that made any sense on a municipal level. So she's really excited to have a community of 20 and be able to think regionally. So I'd love to have, I mean, I've been aching to have a biofi hub, regenerative finance, whether it's Samantha's or Joe's vision or some blend, be something that they're seriously looking at as how can we do our next step. So yes to Roberta.
Well,
I think the multi-capital perspective in this is essential as well. I just want to note that as well.
right. And just one little note on that, Nate, is that we also have a group in Maine called the Maine Philanthropy Center. And they are kind of a philanthropists center. So a lot of philanthropists in the state are served by the Maine Philanthropy Center, and they have a big annual conference that we attended this year. It was my first time, but they are extremely progressive, I would say, at this point in their history. And one of their principals left another foundation, but I had met her when she was with that foundation. And so we've invited her to come to the Foundation House. Now I know that Foundation House is now on a wait list kind of basis, but I really do think that if we could put together a bioregional panel for their conference next year, that would be the kind of thing. They would be a willing and I think very interested audience in just first of all knowing about the movement and how it's growing and also the bioregional finance part of it. I even thought, wouldn't it be great if we could get Sam to be a keynote there as a way to kind of anchor the panel. But I do think that there are philanthropists who are ready for something new, something that they see as more viable in this world that we now inhabit.
Yeah, on that note, Roberta, so definitely in terms of keying into the Maine Community Foundation, New Haven, I'm sure that amongst themselves they know as well. I'll just say this is kind of a parallel conversation to our conversation yesterday in the collective knowledge circle. So, adjacent to the Forests of the Northeast is the Northeast Woodlands Bioregioning Collective. And so in that call yesterday, one of the things we talked about was how the land trust movement and the conservation movement is predisposed towards bioregionalism in a sense, even though they're kind of wary of it because they don't necessarily understand it very well. But what they're doing is consistent with bioregioning, but they're largely fractured. Like they're not working at a landscape scale. They're typically like, I went to the Connecticut land conservation conference this year, and what they kept saying again and again is they're like, there are 48 towns in Connecticut and there are 49 land conservation, so each town has their own land trust. And I think that kind of fragmentation, they probably would welcome, or certain members of that might welcome that. So I think that this kind of aggregation to a bioregional scale can function not just in the financial flow area, but in land conservation and other areas.
And
even Rivers Alliance.
all-
I mean,
Yeah.
even Rivers Alliances, there's lots of them, and they're also ironically fragmented.
Right.
So we
And
can have a lead like Save the Sound, where the water is aggregating.
Right.
What's the state of Long Island Sound is a result of the state of all of those organizations.
Right. Right.
And we have a beautiful book, This Fine Piece of Water, which describes what it was like as Europeans arrived. It's amazing.
what book is that? What book you're
This
talking
Fine
about?
Piece of Water.
This Fine Piece of Water?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Roberta, on your point about having a session around this, so I'm actually kind of we just had our latest open dialogue for R3.0 today, and I don't have the next one scheduled, but we're trying to kind of tee up the different things that are in our conference. And the last thing that I've got to tee up for next month is the resource flows panel, with the last panel of the day of the conference. And so I'm kind of thinking about, that's part of why I'm a little bit frustrated that I didn't get on the call earlier, because Kyle could be a good person to speak in that. Possibly I'm in conversation with Randy about possibly these folks up in Canada and others in that. So if you are having conversations with, say, folks in Maine or folks in New Haven, Nate, that might be interested in this, that just reach out to me.
Okay.
I don't know if that's going to come together or not, but
That would be early August.
it would be sometime in probably early to mid-August, based on the availability of the speakers.
Mm-hmm.
And we typically four at most, and we try to get diversity, gender, cultural, etc.
Really quick, before I have to go, Bill, or Sage, if you could keep me posted about just when that invite goes over, or when you make the connection, just so that I know that we've closed the circle and Tapestry has had like a lead from this, right? And then that way they like us, and we, that's an important circle to close. And thank you for offering that up, because I wasn't able to wrangle any Canadians for this. So
cool. I'll do that, Mike, and maybe I'll even just CC you in that thread and just say, Mike was the connection point here. I want to keep him in the loop.
Great.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Just so I know that the loop's been closed, and it makes it easier for us to go forward with them in the future, because I like Tapestry a lot. I think they're really on the bleeding edge of some good stuff here.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really grateful that you pulled all this together, Mike, especially this is a very busy time for you. So
hold on. I might, before I go, I might be able to, they got home a second ago. One sec.
I think we're going to get a baby viewing.
Oh,
he's eating. Sorry, I can't.
Next time,
next time, Mike.
Next time, you'll see him before long. Anyway,
Okay.
I gotta go. I hope you appreciate my
Great to
paternity
see you
leave.
all.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great to be
Take it
here.
easy. Bye.